This will be the last episode on parameters. We will talk about how to delete keyforms, how to recover the initial state of a drawing, how to reset the art mesh, and we'll talk about common mistakes with parameters, why they happen, how to avoid them, and how to fix them when you do make a mistake. We'll also talk about some design rules for param keyform values, and how not to reset your parameter and keyforms. So let's get to how to delete keyforms. So you already have some keyforms, some green dots created in your parameters. Here are 3 ways that you can delete the keyforms. This model, for example, it has a body X movement. All it does is shifting shape like that. Now let's say on this parameter there are 5 keyforms and I don't need 2 of them. I don't need the 610 and I don't need the negative 610. I only need the negative 10, the 0, and positive 10. There are a few ways to delete this, and the first way I'll show you is to do the manual edit keyform function. You press this button while the object is selected, it would pop up a dialog that shows all the keyforms registered for this parameter for this object. You can select multiple objects that share the same parameter that is active on the same parameter, and they would show all the points for any of them has on. For this particular one, we have negative 10, negative 6, 0, 6, and 10 as listed here. We can simply select this point and say, I don't need number 2, I don't need value negative 6. So I select this point and I press this button. It would ask you to confirm it because whatever work you did to that point will be gone. Once you press yes, it should be gone and you don't see the red dot here on negative 6. Another way to do it is to directly click on the red dot. This would also make the dot disappear. You press OK and everything would be gone. Another way to make a keyform disappear is that notice these 2 buttons over here. One is green and one is the grayed out button that says with a red slash over it. The green one obviously is for creating, and the gray one is basically for removing. You may also notice this button right here. It looks like the remove 1 dot, except that the dot is longer, which means it will remove all the dots on this parameter. This button is also seen in the keyform edit dialog right here. So if you press this button, all the dots will be removed. Or I can press here and remove all. Now remember, these buttons only work for the objects that you're selected. So if you have more than one object that also have the green dots on body X, you would have to select all of them or one by one each of them to remove the dots that you want to remove. The last tool to talk about is a tool that allows you to recover the initial state of the drawing. Now in case you have found that your art mesh, usually in its default state, that it looks different, it looks morphed, it looks transformed, or it's not in the right position or in the right rotation, then you can always select the art mesh and then go to the top menu. There should be a tab modeling. Under modeling there should be edit shape, and under edit shape there should be a button that says revert to original. Now we'll move on to talking about 3 common mistakes. First, the art looks different from the original PSD. Second, sometimes some parts goes invisible. And I don't mean like fading out, I mean like instantly, poof, it's gone. Thirdly, inconsistent movement speed in animation. There are 2 rules for designing parameter keyforms. I'll go through them quickly and then I'll go through them one by one in details. The first rule is that always put the min-max keyform values. So you always want one green dot at the far left and 1 green dot at the far right on the parameter, whenever there is dots. Second of all, 1 default keyform. Always keep 1 green dot that holds the default keyform. I don't care if you have 2 keyforms or 3 or 4, there's always gotta be at least 1 guy who is the default state of the object itself, let it be an art mesh, rotation deformer, or Revert Deformer. The parents can move them, but themselves should not have any editing. All right. So in that one default keyform, don't edit, don't delete, just don't touch it. So why do you need edge key value? All right. What happens if the min-max value is missing? Have you ever experienced the art mesh disappearing, and no matter what you do, you look through everything is at 100% opacity, and all the folders or the parts in the parts tree is not turned invisible? Why is your art mesh disappearing? And how do you investigate that? So right here, the slime, this object, and this deformer has 3 points, body Y, and I just deleted body X earlier. Now I recreate body X, okay? And let's say I will quickly do some simple movement in a deformer, like that, and then the other side, like that. So now it does this. All right, so we have the min and max, the edge keyforms registered. That's no problem. But what if I remove just 1 point? It suddenly disappears. So it reappears whenever you go above 0 and all the way to positive 10. And the body Y don't matter. It always does not make it change. All right, if it's apparent, it will always be apparent. If it's gone, it will always be gone no matter how you move the Y. All right, so something is wrong with this parameter, and the reason the cause of it is because I removed 1 point, and that is the negative 10. Now, this happens maybe not in your awareness, all right? Maybe you open someone else's model, or somewhere in the process of doing a few steps, you are not aware that you did something to it, and until later realize that, hey, I'm trying to test my model and somehow it's gone. So what you can do is think of, okay, something to do with body X. Which parameter is it? All right. Now be careful, because always remember that for one object or for one entity, there could be multiple objects registered with body X. All right. For example, if I click on the art mesh itself, it says there is body X. Okay. Then I'm thinking, okay, this object must be responsible to the problem. All right. So I look around, I look at the inspector, and I'm saying like, well, it's disappearing. Is it the opacity? Okay. But no matter which point I move on, I click on, and it was always on the opacity equals 100%. Okay. So even the moment it disappears, it still says it's 100%. All right. It is not because of the draw order shifting it behind something. All right. If you only have the eyes disappearing, you may think, okay, the eyes maybe is behind the body. Maybe that's why it's disappearing. All right. But it's not the draw order either. All right. So this is the moment when you realize, wait, something is really wrong. It has to be this object. The body X is controlled with this art mesh, and nothing is wrong with the parameter. Now, so this is the point where you want to think, okay, is this really, really the only factor? Is this the only player in this game? All right. So what you want to do is go up and check a few layers top. All right. So you can either click through them, or you can press Ctrl D, which would basically select the immediate parents. Okay. Until a point you find that, all right, apparently there is another deformer, and this guy also have body X, and somehow the negative 10 value is not there. Okay, so what you want to try is adding it back in, and then instantly it reappears. Okay, you may not have the transformation that you previously had or what it's supposed to do. However, it makes it appear, and that's enough for our answer. Is that okay? The reason why it didn't show up, it's because between the last point and the end point, there is no middle point. It doesn't know what information the transformation should be. Okay, so make sure that you have a min and max, otherwise things will disappear. And if things disappear, one of the possible reasons is because you're missing a point. So now you know what it does to the object. It could be on the art mesh, it could be on rotation deformer, it could be on warp deformer. But however, knowing about this behavior, another common mistake is people rely on this behavior and they try to think of this as some kind of method for swapping between two textures. Okay, here's my note for you is that do not rely on this method to do texture swapping. Do not rely on this method to make things disappear. Next point, one default keyform. You have to preserve the original art. It is your responsibility. And even though it may not look bad or weird or anything, if your model at its default state, it does not look at least 99.2% the same as the original PSD, then you are doing something that is unprofessional. And I don't know if 100% your client or your artist would complain about it, but it is basically a fatal mistake of a Live2D designer. So preserve your original art. Okay, however, if there is a mistake, okay, and say you slipped it or some mistake was somewhere you made it, a mistake that would cause the original form no longer is the same when everything is default, then what are the ways to recover them? Because what I want you to learn today is that recovering original form is difficult, especially if the mistake is caused by the deformer. When recovering is difficult, you want to stay alert, you want to avoid the mistake instead of casually move on without noticing there's any mistake. Okay? So in case, worst case scenario, there is such thing as, the default shape is not what I want it to be. What ways are there? Now, just now we talked about the button that allows you to revert original shape of the art mesh. Yeah, but even though it exists, it doesn't work on deformers. It only works on art mesh. Okay, so let's see for ourselves in this example. So let's say we have Mr. Slime here moving from left to the right with body X. And now, at some point in our editing, I messed up. I accidentally have this warp deformer, which contains several layers down all the way to the body and all the body parts. I somehow at X equals body X 0, that the head is dented. All right, so I got this going on. Okay. And you think it's a minor thing, and maybe I cannot Control Z to undo things and step back. Maybe I save the file, and next morning when I wake up, I reopen the file and realize that, wait a minute, this is not the default form. Like if I click this button and say revert everything to default values, it's still not the default form. So I'm altering the default state that now it's looks different from the original PSD. So how do I fix this? Now we just talked about the method about reverting the art mesh, right? So let's try to do that. Let's select the art mesh. In fact, select all the art mesh that are affected, including the eyes and whatnot. Everything should be involved. Let me select all, remove deformer, and say, hey, let's go edit shape and revert back to original. All right, cool. We have the thing pop back up like that. Seems good. Something is little bit off, but I mean overall the body is still, normal size, right? Because originally you had a dented problem, right? So if I select this thing, the art mesh, and first clue we notice is that, wait a minute, the deformer is not regular rectangle shape, right? If I Control D and go up a level, up to the first parent, and I think like, wait a minute, even the parent is not a regular rectangle, because whenever we create a warp deformer as a new one, it should always be rectangle. But now even I create a new one, it's dented. Like, why is it dented? The object, art mesh itself, is not showing its dent. However, the parent is. You create new parent, it also is. And so you go up another level, and another level, and another level. And up to a point where it gets to the actual problem is when the body X equals 0, the deformer presses head down. Now, even though you reverted the art mesh, it doesn't mean you reverted all the instances, all right? As soon as you move the body X, everything goes wild. So right now, originally it was only the middle point that had problems, right? Because denting. And this point and this point were right. However, after I reverted the art mesh, now this point and this point are wrong. They are popping head up. So it's almost, you can tell that they're reverting. They're inverting the effect of the mistake that was caused here. Now it's popping up. That concludes that the method of using the revert to original shape function does not solve the problem if the problem is the warp deformer. What if we delete and recreate keyform? So let's say we have a mistake, like right here, and I will say that there is actually a midpoint right here. Okay, and at this point, I want the object to jump up. So it does this. It goes up and down as it travels to the left side. Okay? What if I have some forms that is change? Actually, I'll do it in midpoint. What if we have the same problem? We dented the head right here, and we no longer can backstep or do anything to recover the state, at least as far as we know. Can we delete this point and recreate this point? Now what I'll do here is I will just delete the keyform. And I recreate the keyform. Well, it seems back to normal, but notice that the position has been shifted upwards, right? It is now somewhere in between this point and this point. Between -5 to +10, somewhere in between, it adapts to the state. Now, no matter whenever we don't have a keyform, then the red dot will only render or will perform the state of the object as it is in the percentage between this and this point. Okay, so if I move it here and I even rotate it or do all kinds of crazy things with my this point, okay, every time I delete it, it will revert back to this position right here, and this position is between this point and this point. All right, if there's A, B, C, and D, whenever we delete C point, C will become somewhere in between B and D every time. All right, so deleting and recreating your point, if you're very lucky, it may work. For example, if your A point is rotating -30 degree and then your C point is rotating +30 degree, then when you delete the midpoint B and recreate it, it actually resets back to 0, which is exactly what you want it to be and which is the same as the moment the PSD dropped in. But most of the time, it is not going to be the case, and thus removing and recreating keyform is not going to help. What if I wipe out all the keyform parameter and recreate all the keyforms so that it doesn't adapt anything? Well, the problem is that even if you wipe out all keyforms, it is still going to adapt that current state. So for example, if I dented the head at 0.0, and I just, move around to check, like, okay, I just don't like this. I have to, okay, I'm going to reset the whole X, all right? I'm going to reset the whole X. I'm going to remove this. And the moment I remove all the forms, you notice that the deformer and all the child objects are still at the moment I press wipe, okay? If I back a step and go to somewhere in between, I don't know, around 4.2, and then I wipe it again, then it will stay the same as 4.2, all right? In fact, the other pairing parameter is still working, but even if I wipe though, it's still piece of the damage. So adaptation still works because it's still working on you against your objective, because the moment you press wipe, it is still going to adapt that moment as the eternal form. Until you recreate it, If you recreate the points, it's still going to be it. You can try to fix it, but then you got to fix all the point. And goes back to the problem is that you're manually fixing these points, which can be very sensitive. What if I delete and create a deformer again? Since I made a mistake on a deformer, maybe I'll just make a new one. This is what's going to happen if you try to make a new deformer. All right, let's say this deformer is a goner. I already did this to the art mesh. Okay, and now I will press. I selected. I know exactly which deformer does that. It's the body XY. Okay, I'll just delete. And then I'll recreate this parent body XY, which should be at the default, regular rectangular shape, right? So I press delete. The object is gone. And I select the immediate child that, it was belonging to just now. And then I press create and make a new one. Okay, what do you see here? Now, the parent warp deformer is back to normal. However, the child objects and all layers of child object, all the way down to the bottom layer of the art mesh, everything is skewed. You see the polygons are skewed. You go up every level of the parents, and you notice every level does the exact same malformation, right? So once you delete the object, your child will adapt them and all levels of it. You know what I mean? So all the generations, all the way down to the root art mesh object, everything will remember the mistake you've done on them. So deleting the parent is not going to work. Moving the child out of the parent is not going to work. Nothing is going to work for damage that is already done. If I go back a step, okay, if I go back to the step before I made the mistake, okay, I actually preserve let's say, for any reason that my x-10 is the default keyform, okay? If I still had this, I can always Ctrl-Shift-C, Ctrl-Shift-V, and then copy it over to recover the default state. So keeping a default state, it could be temporary too. It could be temporarily, I make a extra dot here to remember before I make any changes to it. I can Ctrl-C, Ctrl-Shift-V, and then take this point over here first, all right? And I can do anything weird to this afterwards. If it doesn't work out, I can always copy this over, and when I'm done, I can just delete this point. All right, so preserving one source of truth, preserving one keyform that is keeping the original state is very important. As a summary, we have been through how to create keyforms, how to edit them, change them around, and now in this episode we learned about how to delete them one or multiple keyforms. Now, we also learned about when you delete keyforms, something may happen, it may not go back to the state before it was edited, okay? We learned about the revert to original shape tool, which only works for art mesh. However, it doesn't work for warp deformer. Warp deformer is very hard to revert back to its original state if you never kept a default state in one of the keyform values. So we learned some of the rules, some of the things that we shouldn't do, and even learned about how easy they happen. Okay, so this part is up to you. You should be responsible of keeping track of any changes of the default state. Once it's done, it's hard to recover. It's hard to revert the changes. It's hard to edit back to normal. Okay, so this is part of your professional training, is to be sensitive, be alert, and be responsible. Next episode, we'll move away from parameters and we'll talk about editing tools, such as the soft brush tool, the lasso tool, and the deform path tool.